Content warning, this video is about the 50 Shades of Grey franchise, which means it contains references to pretty much every type of abuse there is, including self-harm, so be warned. Okay, so it's that time of year we talk about Twilight and Twilight-adjacent movies, and there's no Twilight-adjacent movies quite like the 50 Shades of Grey trilogy. Here's the thing, the 50 Shades of Grey franchise lives rent-free in my mind, but my thoughts on the series are so scattershot, I couldn't possibly do a beat-by-beat recap analysis like I usually do with these things. Certainly not for all three movies. So instead I'm just gonna sit down and talk about 50 Shades of Grey. Full disclosure, I have watched Dan Olson and Jenny Nicholson's videos on these movies an inordinate amount of times, so I'm probably inevitably going to regurgitate some of their points, but I think I have just enough to say to make this my own. So, let's start with where this month demands, with Twilight. So, if you're somehow completely unaware, 50 Shades of Grey began life as an erotic Twilight fanfic titled Master of the Universe. No, not that one. This creates an interesting parallel between the Twilight books and movies and the 50 Shades of Grey books and movies. See, in the Twilight books, we get Bella's running inner monologue, and while people have pointed out that she's not a particularly proactive character in her own story, I would argue that the addition of the inner monologue makes her a much stronger character in the books than she is in the movies. In the books, Bella is competent, she shows general awareness of what's going on, and even expresses real emotion. Unfortunately, the movie has pretty bad directing, and by extension, pretty bad acting. Kristen Stewart plays every scene like she's confused, horny, or in most cases, both. This portrayal completely robs her of pretty much all her strong character traits, which weren't even that many to begin with, and makes her an incredibly weak, codependent, and overall not very competent character. On the flip side, 50 Shades of Grey books also give their main character, Anastasia Steele, a running inner monologue, and let me tell ya, this bitch is clueless. Anna is confused by everything, and the books take every opportunity to infantilize her. Bella has some codependency issues, but she doesn't have shit on Anastasia Steele. But then, in the movies, they've removed Anna's inner monologue and cast Dakota Johnson, who plays Anna with a level of dignity that is absent from the books. That, along with some minor but very meaningful changes to certain scenes, makes Anna a much more well-rounded character in the movie. And that's not the film's only positive. The sets are good, the costume design is very purposeful, and overall, it's just a really pretty well-shot movie. Compare this to the moody, washed-out, poorly white-balanced color scheme of Twilight, and you start to see the yin and yang of these films. Twilight is mediocre source material being dragged down by poor filmmaking, where 50 Shades of Grey is excellent filmmaking being drugged down by terrible source material. And this is part of what's so fascinating about 50 Shades of Grey to me. It's incredibly rare that you can pin nearly all the problems with a movie, and especially a franchise of movies, on one person, but it's even more rare when that one person isn't a director or producer on the film. But here, nearly every problem with this series can be traced back to one Miss E.L. James. Truth be told, the first movie is much better than the second and third movies, so most of my criticism is going to be directed at those. The writer and the director on the first movie did a really good job translating the material. In fact, too good. Both of them left the series after the first one because of disputes with E.L. James, who replaced them with a TV director for hire and her own goddamn husband. So, let's talk about 50 Shades of Grey's origin as serialized fanfiction. Frankly, there's a lot you can get away with in a serial fanfic that you just can't with a novel, and especially not a movie. But that shouldn't be a big deal, because in the process of going from a fanfic to a novel, you likely have an editor there to help sort of clean up the eccentricities. I mean, you already have to change the characters' names, you can also take the time to sort out the plot, make it work a little better for the medium. That is, unless you're E.L. James and you've decided your erotic Twilight fanfic is the divinely inspired word, and not one jot or tittle of it shall be changed. Tittle. It's the dot that goes over the I. The most obvious example, to me at least, is Christian's helicopter crash in Darker. This can be very dramatic and suspenseful if you know it's gonna be a couple weeks until you find out if he survives. But when you're reading a book, you can just flip to the next page. And in the movie, it's beyond anticlimactic. His helicopter crashes, and 2 minutes later, he walks in completely fine. Honestly, this is so close to the end, I don't know why they didn't just put it at the end of the movie and make it a cliffhanger for the third film. And then you have anomalies like Jose. Jose is a friend of Anna's who flirts with her and clearly crosses a line in a scene so minor and irrelevant, I wouldn't be surprised if you'd forgotten it even if you had seen these movies. His biggest moment comes at the beginning of Darker, where he's hosting a photo gallery that is entirely photos of Anna, and this is unrelated to my actual point, but that's super creepy. If it were one picture, or a collection of pictures in an otherwise unrelated exhibit, or hell, if he had just told Anna he was doing this, it would be okay. This is stalker shit. Anyways, this is a setup for Christian to buy all of the photos and dramatically re-enter Anna's life after they broke up in the first movie. After this, Jose is irrelevant. He does nothing of consequence in the entire series. He barely has any lines after this. But he just keeps showing up, and in the weirdest places. They throw a birthday party for the notoriously reclusive Christian Grey, and it's a small event, it's all family. Anna's friend Kate is there, but she's dating Christian's brother, so that checks out. But then, Jose is there. Who invited Jose? Christian doesn't even like Jose. But of course it all starts to add up when you find out he's Jacob! Okay, you can't write Jacob out of your Twilight fanfic, but you could definitely write Jose out of these movies. And then, well, I don't mean to insult the writers of these fanfictions, but it's pretty clear to me that Snow Queen Ice Dragon, E.L. James, didn't think this all the way through before she started writing it. There's a lot of plot threads that just don't go anywhere. In the third movie, Anna discovers Christian's brother is cheating on her friend Kate. That same day, he proposes to Kate, and we never see these characters again. They are just gone from the franchise. And you know what? In the chaos of these movies, I didn't even notice at first, but then 3 days later, I was washing dishes or something, and I just went, "Hey, wait a minute. They never resolved the Christian's brother cheating plotline." Now, this stuff is fine if you're an amateur publishing to a free-to-use fanfic site. Sometimes you forget you introduced something, or fan interest takes the story in another direction, or hell, sometimes you just don't like the thing you set up. But if you're going to publish a book, you should really be treating that fanfic as a first draft and not the final copy. And if you're already gonna have to cut stuff to make a film adaptation, you should be cutting the stuff that goes nowhere. These are things that should have been sorted out before the book's release. The fact that some of them persist all the way to a film adaptation is frankly unacceptable. You had 2 opportunities to fix this. So, a common criticism leveled against this franchise is that Christian Grey is a horrible person. Allow me to pile on. Christian Grey is a horrible person. For a while, I really struggled to describe just how terrible of a person Christian Grey is, and then it hit me. Christian Grey is Dennis from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, but not played for laughs. And I mean late series Dennis when he gets really creepy. He consistently tries to undermine Anna's agency and is controlling in ways that extend way past the bedroom. This is less of a problem in the first movie, where Anna actually manages to have a backbone. Frankly, I think the first movie's ending is really powerful.
Stop. No!
Anna.
Christian.
Like, holy shit, that'd be amazing in a better movie. Unfortunately, they have to ruin that with a sappy montage because this franchise is forbidden from ever reaching its potential. But even with a backbone, Anna's gonna be in trouble because the worst thing about Christian isn't that he's controlling or disrespectful of Anna's boundaries or even that he's borderline abusive. It's that he's right. In the 50 Shades of Grey universe. You have no idea how many times Christian makes some ridiculous demand of Anna, Anna ignores it, as any normal human would, and then something bad happens that could have been avoided if she'd just listened. It's like some heavy-handed morality show for kids if they meant always obey daddy in a completely different way. Of course, I would be remiss not to mention my favorite of Christian's ridiculous demands. It's Anna's first day back at work after their honeymoon, and only a few hours in, Christian storms into her office to whine that she hasn't updated her email address to Anastasia Gray. That is how petty this man is. Also, this is a bit of a nitpick, and I don't really know where else to put it, but the name Christian is so metaphorically loaded, and they just do nothing with it. With heroes like these, who needs enemies?
Jekyll, Jekyll, Hyde, Jekyll, Hyde, Hyde, Jekyll. Jekyll, Jekyll, Hyde, Jekyll, Hyde.
So, 50 Shades of Grey is not a series that really requires a villain. Firstly, because Christian is already the villain, but also because the first one is just a romance movie, there's no villainy going on. And that may be another reason the sequels aren't as good as the first one, because they introduce some of the silliest villains ever. For a lot of Darker, Anna is being stalked by a woman who turns out to be one of Christian's former submissives who attempts to kill Anna and is just quickly escorted off screen halfway through the movie. It does kind of set up the third act breakup where Anna has to reconsider her relationship with Christian because she doesn't want to end up like that girl, but like, why make her so sinister? Or alternatively, why do so little with her? They say in the movie she showed up at Christian's apartment and slit her wrist after Anna and Christian got together, something the audience never gets to see and just hears about from Christian after the fact. Like, you could have done so much more with this character. She could have had a real impact. And instead she just disappears partway through her only movie. So let's talk about the real villain, and perhaps one of the funniest ever written. In 50 Shades Darker, Anna gets a job at a publishing firm as the assistant to a big-shot fiction editor. His name is Jack Hyde. Jack Hyde. That's the name of a Monster High character, not the villain in your erotic thriller. So I want to start by saying, first off, Jack doesn't treat Anna that much differently than Christian did when they met. That's the level of dissonance we're on with this series. Apparently Jack has sexually harassed his last 3 assistants, but he gets fired for doing it to Anna because her boyfriend just bought the company. That sounds about right, honestly. So then Jack sets out to get revenge on Christian, not for getting fired, but because he and Christian just so happen to have been at the same orphanage, and Jack resents Christian for being adopted by rich parents. But Jack, you're a Harvard graduate with a prestigious position at a major publishing company. Hell, he gets arrested for firebombing their servers, and his bail is set at $500,000, which he just pays? Like, Jack, if you just have $500,000 sitting around, I don't think you had that tough of a time getting by. And, of course, it's completely unnecessary because he got fired from his prestigious position. I don't think he needs any more motivation than that. This just seems like overly convenient backfill. And let's talk about his most hilarious exploit. Jack Hyde manages to sneak into Christian's house and tamper with his helicopter in such a way that it takes off but won't stay airborne for long. By himself. 3 days after he is fired from his position as a fiction editor. Props for dedication, my dude. Then, while Christian is away on his honeymoon, Jack uses his old employee ID to get into the company mainframe and firebombs the servers. But, when he got fired, Christian hadn't even proposed to Anna. It has to be at least 2.5 months later that he's doing this. Why does his employee ID still work? And, can we talk about how, despite taking upwards of a third of Freed's screen time, nothing in the Jack Hyde story affects the characters outside of the Jack Hyde story? The other girl at least made Anna reconsider being with Christian, but you could cut Jack entirely, and Anna and Christian's story basically plays out the same? Well, okay, no. He's important in the sense that he needs to get fired so that Anna can take his position for making the bold statement, this book company should sell more books. And definitely not because her obscenely wealthy boyfriend just bought the company. Honestly, I thought of adding a whole section about Anna as a character, but I really only have one thing to say about her. Anna is a Mary Sue in the sense that her rich boyfriend just buys her everything she wants. Which is not unrealistic, but it does make for a very uninteresting story. Okay, what else do we need to talk about with this franchise? Oh yeah, the kinky shit! So, if there's one thing you know about 50 Shades of Grey, it's probably the BDSM stuff, and yet we've barely talked about it so far. And this, again, is a problem with coming from fanfiction. See, this series was originally uploaded to fanfiction.net, which has pretty strict rules about not safe for work content. So while raunchier versions were uploaded to Snow Queen Ice Dragon's personal website, nothing too important could happen in those raunchier segments, or else the fanfiction.net audience wouldn't know what was going on. Also, the BDSM stuff definitely has more of an impact on the first movie, which is the one I've been criticizing less than the others. In fact, let me start with some praise. I think, conceptually, 50 Shades of Grey has something really interesting to say. At its core, it asks the question, what do you do when someone you love has a fetish that makes you uncomfortable? And conversely, what do you do when someone you love is uncomfortable with your fetish? How much do you accept about your partner, and how much of yourself are you willing to sacrifice to make a relationship work? Don't worry though, 50 Shades is not actually interested in answering that question. The first movie ends with Christian pretty clearly crossing the line, and then in the second movie, Anna is just suddenly also into BDSM. No escalation, she's just yeah, fuck it. So I guess you're gonna have to write your own story if you want answers to those questions. So let's talk about the portrayal of BDSM fetishists in this series. The series received, mixed responses from BDSM enthusiasts. On the one hand, something this massive and mainstream really helps normalize having these niche fetishes. On the other hand, Christian is a pretty bad example of a BDSM fetishist. The series makes it abundantly clear he is into BDSM because he likes to imagine the girls he's beating are his abusive, crackhead birth mother, and he only got into the scene because an older woman introduced him to it as a minor. A woman, I might add, he has continued being friends with, and when Anna gets upset that he is still friends with someone who took advantage of him sexually as a child, he acts like she's being unreasonable. So the implication that people only get into BDSM because of abuse is, problematic to say the least. And that problem only escalates when people start telling Anna she's fixing him. Now, like I said earlier, Christian is generally a shitty person, so there is a lot to fix. But when you hear that about a character who's into a very specific fetish because of abuse, you maybe raise an eyebrow. Do you mean fix any of his horrible behavior, or do you mean fix the BDSM stuff? Luckily, this is a place where two wrongs do make a right, because they don't mean either of those. Christian ends the series with the shallowest character arc I've ever seen. He's not a better person, but he's also still into BDSM. It's a lot of telling and not a lot of showing. Everyone keeps talking about how Christian is better, but he never really acts much different. But, the sex scenes are hot, so at least you have that. I could talk about this series way longer than I probably should, so I think I'll end it here. 50 Shades of Grey is trying really hard to be a good movie, but the powers that be wouldn't let it, and its sequels come up short in a variety of ways. Honestly, I'm worried this video is maybe a tad incoherent, and that's mostly because these movies are incoherent. I don't really know how to explain what goes on in them except just going through point by point. Should you watch these movies? Depends on your taste. If you're a curious individual like me, yeah, sure, you'll probably get something out of them. To me, they belong to a very small subset of bad movies that don't necessarily entertain me, but do fascinate me a lot. But I wouldn't be showing these for a bad movie night unless all your friends were already on board with what you were doing. It's strange and unique, but not always in good or even entertaining ways. There's something to it, but it will probably forever remain a pop culture curiosity. Until next time, I'm Matt. Have a nice day.